Thank you very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening and welcome to the show. We've got three smashing guests for you tonight, all from the world of television. And don't forget that you can tweet, you can email, or you can use Facebook, and all the details are right there on the screen. Time now to meet my first guest on the program tonight. She is an award-winning television writer. Please welcome Gail Renard. Now, Gail, you grew up in Montreal in
Yes.
Canada. When you were 16, just a young girl, something really major happened in your life, and it involved John Lennon and a big event that was going on there at the time.
Yes, I still can't believe it. When I grew up, I was the biggest Beatle maniac, and nothing ever happened in Montreal, nothing. And one day I heard on the radio that John and Yoko were in town, and I thought, how could this be? And they were going to do something called a bed-in.
Yes.
And all I knew is, when you're 16, your brain doesn't engage, and you just go, I've got to get there now. And I raced down to the hotel, and it was surrounded by hundreds of fans and police. And I thought, I'll never get anywhere. I just wanted to catch a glimpse. And I thought, how do I do this? And I went round to the back of the hotel, and no one was there. And there was a fire escape and other things, and I went for it. And I got into the hotel, ducked and dived, back staircases, and I came to where the Lennon suite was. I waited until no one was there, knocked. Yoko answered, and I said, could I please have an interview for my school newspaper? And I never dreamt I would get that far, and she said, yes, come in, and I found myself face to face with John Lennon.
So they were very welcoming to you.
Yeah.
There were lots of famous people there at the time. I know Petula Clark was there.
Yes. Well, I was going to say I was lucky. I arrived just before it started.
Yeah.
So for all they knew, I was the bed-in. You know? They didn't know thousands of people were going to end up coming. And so I got in right then when they said, would you please help? And then everybody in the world came to the door.
Yes. Not all of them were pro Lennon, were they? I mean,
No.
Al Capp, for example, you've got a theory about him.
Well, yes, Al Capp was a great cartoonist who
Yes.
did Little Abner and other comic strips.
Yeah.
But he was, you know, rumored to be a friend of Nixon and a friend of the CIA. But he was very, was it called, a hawk as opposed to dove in those days. And he just, he was there to subvert, but also from the moment he came in, he was rude. I mean, he would call John and Yoko dirty hippies, and worse, which I won't say to a gentleman, and I'm a lady. And he was just really, really nasty. And he was trying to get John angry because 100 cameras were on him. And John knew the game better than anyone. And he didn't get riled, kept always his temper, because he told us at the very beginning that the whole 8 days was about peace. Never give the press any other story. Don't let them make it into something it's not. You know, Al Capp would have loved if Peace Rally becomes Punch Up,
Yes.
or Lennon isn't very peaceful, or whatever. And John was right. It was no drink, no drugs. He didn't want anything but the peace story.
Now, it was, of course, when they recorded Give Peace a Chance.
Yes.
And, you know, I must say this to you, you know, whenever I drive up the M25, I see that graffiti that's been there forever saying, Give Peace a Chance. And it always makes me laugh. But you played on that record.
Oh, yes. Tambourine playing?
Yes.
Have you ever heard tambourine playing like Give Peace a Chance? That was me.
Yes.
Yeah, we all did. I mean, it's incredible to think that I was on a John Lennon record. It's still, somebody asked me whether it's my favorite song, and I will go, well, it is now, yes. You know. It was recorded, he decided while he had all the stars were there, because he had Tommy Smothers from the Smothers Brothers.
Yes.
And Petula Clark, and, you know, he had all the stars, and he thought, let's record a song. He had always wanted to record a peace anthem that would last for all time. And I was with him when he wrote down the lyrics.
You became very friendly with them. You babysat their daughter,
Yeah,
didn't you?
I did everything. I babysat, it was Yoko's 5-year-old daughter, Kyoko.
Yeah.
And I just pitched in and helped, because Derek Taylor, who was the Beatles press officer,
Yeah.
the great Derek, was masterminding everything. And I became Derek's assistant, because you had hundreds and hundreds of press. It was, you know, reporters, newspapers, film, television, radio, all pouring in. And you had to keep it moving and make sure everyone had their time. And you know, the Hare Krishnas moved in, and
Yeah.
there were the fans.
It's a fantastic story, because before that you always knew from the early days that you wanted to be a writer.
Yes.
One reason that you left Canada and you came here to the
Yeah.
UK. But I think John Lennon was quite supportive, wasn't he?
He was, because what was great were the quiet moments, the downtime when he'd go, clear all the press out, because they were at it from morning till night for 8 days straight. And then we would have talks. And he said once, what do you want to do? And he was one of the few people I could say, because when you're 16, you don't say, I want to become a writer.
No.
It's not, your parents aren't going to be thrilled. And I told him, and he said, have you sold anything? And I said, no, I'm 16. And he went, okay. And he went, he rang a Beatles magazine in Britain and said, she's going to be sending you an article about me, buy it.
Brilliant.
He hung up,
Yeah.
and he turned back and he said, you've just sold your first story, you're a writer, so now write. And I thought, well, if John says I'm a writer, I must be.
Yeah.
But do you know what a gift that is to anyone, much less a teenager?
Now, inspired by this, you
Yeah.
came to the UK.
Yep.
One of the first people you met was John Cleese.
Yes. Well, it was my other theory, because I needed money to live. And the Pythons had just started and were huge in Canada. And I thought, if I can get an interview with the different Pythons, I could write it up for the Canadian newspapers and sell it and, you know, make some money, which is what I did. But along the way, I managed to become friends with them all. And I'd wanted to stay, because it was my last holiday before I graduated university. And I just wanted to stay here in Britain and write comedy. And John Cleese said, no, you have to go back. You have to finish your degree. If you still want to come, I will help you. And I didn't want to, but I did. And when I came back, when I finished my degree, he invited me, I lived with him and Connie Booth for the first few weeks until I got settled. And he helped me, he actually gave me tutorials on writing comedy and helped me write sitcom and gave me introductions. I have been so lucky, David.
Well, you're lucky, but talented. Come on.
In the right place at the right time.
All this link with John Lennon inspired your book, Give Me a Chance.
Yes. Because also it has a lot of photos, about 30 photos that I took, because I had my little camera. But my God, I was a good photographer for 16. So I've got lots of photos of John and Yoko that nobody had ever seen. And some great ones with me in the bed. It's like, I'm here, you know. So I wrote the book also to thank John, because there's so many bad stories we hear about people.
Yeah.
But John, and I knew him afterwards, was nothing but kind to me the whole time. And he also gave me, after the bed-in, after the recording of Give Peace a Chance, he gave me his original handwritten lyrics.
Oh, wow.
That were the big on the
Yeah.
cardboard for the sing-along. And he gave those to me. And that was quite a souvenir.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Now, since then, you've had a very, very successful career
Well,
as a television writer. You've written children's programs,
Yep.
of course, a lot of comedy programs. Tell us about some of the hit series you've been involved with.
Well, I hate to brag, but I know the Chuckle Brothers.
Yes.
I've done
Chuckle Vision.
Yeah, I've done various comedies. I've done, you know, various sitcoms. I started as a baby writer at about 19 on the Doctor series, Doctor in the House and all those Doctor in Charge. That's thanks again to John Cleese introducing me onto that, because he wrote those series as well. So that was a great place to cut your teeth. And a lot of children's. And I did Famous Pipkins with Hartley Hare.
Yes. We're going to find out more about that, because
yes.
we've got somebody else coming on who's
Yes.
been involved with that series. I think actually you're working together too on something new, aren't you?
Yeah, we're doing, because in the old days with Pipkins, we were all studio based, the great ATV in Birmingham as well as Elstree. And making a series was easy. You went and said, I had an idea. And with luck, Lou Grade would say, okay, here's the money. And you went away and made it. Those days are gone.
Yes.
And the internet's here. And the original Pipkins creators, and we're going to be meeting someone in a minute.
Yeah.
We all got together again because we stayed friends and loved working together. And we thought we want to do a children's series. It's sort of a Pipkins Next Generation for the new generation. It's not the Pipkins characters, but it's Monty and Co. Hopefully equally lovable. And it's the same sort. Pipkins was about, although it was puppets and animals, it's about a blended family. And it's comedy, it's drama, it's puppets, it's slapstick, but it's a story. And it's, families don't always get along together.
Indeed.
Yes, but it works out in the end. And instead it's Monty, so we have Monty the Wallaby, Eddie the Elephant, Lulu the Bear, and also Gabriella the Flamenco, the pink flamenco. And
lovely.
it's a lot of fun, but we're producing it ourselves, which
Yes.
means we're going to start on the internet.
Yeah.
And we're going to
Does this mean you have to raise the money yourselves?
Yes, and I was going to ask you, David.
Well, I got a little bit of small change in my pocket
We'll
here.
take
That's
it.
any good.
We're going to be doing Kickstarter.
Yeah.
So if I can ask people to have a look at, we do have a website,
Yeah.
which have a look, montyandco.co.uk.
Okay.
And we'll give all the details about when Kickstarter
Yeah.
will be starting. And also we have Monty and Co. Facebook and Twitter. And we're getting everything together. And Hartley Hare is also very excited about it, which you'll find out.
Well, I'm hoping that he might be around here somewhere.
My God.
And it might come out of his warren. I know, do hares have warrens like rabbits?
I think Hartley would have a palace.
He's probably got a palace.
Yeah, he has
We're
high
hoping
standards.
He'll come out of his palace and join us very soon. Now, I introduced you earlier as an award-winning
Oh, yes.
writer. So tell us about your award.
I mention it every chance I can get. I've got a Bafta Award, which I'm very proud of.
Well done.
I got it, thank you. I did, it was a BBC series, which was a co-production with the great RTE in Ireland. It was a teenage comedy series, children's, called Custer's Last Stand-Up. And it was sort of autobiographical. It was about, except I wasn't a boy or Irish.
No.
It was about a teenager who was desperate to get into comedy and be a stand-up. And it's all the things that he went through trying to be at school and do comedy and stand up and learning. And I was very proud to get a Bafta for that.
Was it a surprise when it happened?
Oh, it was a shock. You
Yeah.
never think. You never think for a moment.
No.
But it was a very happy series.
No, I've sadly, not surprisingly, never had one of these awards, but I understand
You will.
that they're very heavy.
Oh, they are. They give it to you and you go, now they have to have a plasticky one for on air because you can't.
Really?
It's
Yeah.
really heavy.
Yeah.
But you are so happy when you win it. It could be light as a feather. You wouldn't put it down. But I think Chris Tarrant told a story once because he had been at the BAFTAs and he won something. And he celebrated rather well. And he woke up the next morning with a BAFTA in his arms, and it said "Best Actor John Thor." So,
So he got his.
yes, they tell
Yeah.
you don't put it down because
He slept with it.
yeah.
Wonderful. Now we're going to hear more about the Pipkins, but tell us first of all before we meet our next guest, and maybe you stay on with him
Oh,
because
thank
you obviously know each other, work together.
Cheers.
But how did you get involved with the Pipkin?
What a good question. I think I was doing something else at ATV. And in those days, which was great, they knew you because it really was a studio and it was a family. And they tried to keep you within the family and help your career along. And I think one day they just said, would you go and meet, I must have been doing something else. Would you go down the hall and have a word because we think you might,
Yeah.
Pipkins might like you. And we just hit it off. I mean, as you'll see, how could you not love Hartley? And I was very, very lucky because I was very young. I must have been 20, 21.
Yeah.
And you really, you learnt your craft. I was very lucky because I owe a lot to Lord Grade.
Yes.
And I actually, in the last year of his life, I got to thank him.
Oh, good.
Because I wanted to say, I learned
Yeah.
everything from your studio and
Yes.
how to be professional. And I said, you gave me my first series. And he said, what was it? And I said, it was Kids from 47A, made in Birmingham. And without blinking an eye, he told me what the overseas sales were.
Now that is a businessman. Isn't it sad, really, that we don't have people around like that today?
He was a great
Yeah.
personality and
Yes.
entrepreneur.
He
And
was.
he left talent alone. If they trusted you, and look, you might come a cropper, you might do a terrible series, but it would be your terrible series and you'd move on. Nobody died. But they left, that's why, you know, you got Thunderbirds, that's why you got The Prisoner, that's why you got all the great series. They said they would give you the green light, and then it's give us the tapes at the end.
Yeah. Well, listen, don't go away. We're going to
Thank
take
you.
a very quick break. And when we come back, we are going to meet maybe that little furry character that you were talking about, but also the narrator of Pipkin. So don't go away. Thank you very much indeed, and welcome back. The preschool series Pipkins ran on ITV from 1973 to 1981. The narrator, who also voiced several of the characters, is Nigel Plaskett, and he joins us now. Nigel Plaskett, ladies and gentlemen. So, Nigel, how did you become a puppeteer?
Well, I started out to be an actor. That was my raison d'etre at the beginning. And very soon after I started doing that, I was approached by ATV asking me if I could do character voices. And no actor ever says no. Can you ride a bike? Yeah, of course I can ride a bike. So yeah, I said I can do the character voice. And I had a meeting with the producer of this TV show. And it was Pipkins. Yeah. And he said to me at the same time, could you do the puppet as well as do the character voice? So I said, yes, okay, I'll do that. No idea about TV puppets, but I just took the bull by the horns and we started out. I think you can see that if you look at the early work. And 9 years later, I was still doing the same show. So,
yeah. So you did the entire series from the beginning?
Yes.
Originally, it was called Inigo Pipkin,
That's
wasn't
right,
it?
yes.
But sadly, the person who was Inigo died, I think, very early on.
George Woodbridge, the well-known character actor who's in all those Hammer horror movies, always the innkeeper. He died, sadly, halfway through the second series. And so when we came to do the third series, we had to confront what we were going to do. And so it was decided we would change the name of the programme to call it Pipkins, which reflected the place rather than the person. And we actually confronted the fact that he died in the programme and why he wasn't there. And it was the first time, as far as I know, that it was done in a preschool children's programme.
So it was a very sensitive subject, and you obviously handled it very carefully.
I think so, yes, yeah. And it was one of the few programmes that we got a lot of feedback from at that time, because now you have the internet, you get feedback all the time.
Yes.
But in those days, it was the letters that came in, and we knew from that the way we'd handled the whole thing had done it very well. In fact, we did a death again about 3 years later. One of the goldfish died. Not quite the same thing, but
it's a bit easier, that one.
It was a bit easier, but it covered the same subject.
Now, I mentioned that, of course, you were the narrator, but you played several characters as well, played and handled several characters. So who were all the characters that you were?
Yeah, well, I did the voices for and played them. Mooney the Badger, the Tortoise, Uncle Hare, Angus McHare, and the kind of main character of the series, which was Hartley Hare.
Yes, now I understand that you brought your little furry friend with you today, and I think he may just have a few words for us, would he?
I think he might. Hang on.
Here
Excuse
he
me,
is.
could you
Look.
come up here?
Look, he's very cute.
Thank you.
Oh,
Oh, my goodness me.
what you doing? Your hands are cold. Oh, thank you. Hello.
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 I say you're a very posh hare, aren't you?
Well, I'm on a TV show with you, David. I'm just echoing your very smart accent. That's what I do.
Are you the original hare, or are you son of
Well, actually, I'm the son of, because the original one wore out many years ago.
Oh.
Yes, it's a shame. Still, I'm very much the same.
You're very cute.
I am,
and
thank you.
very, very engaging, and a little bit of a scene stealer. I think.
Oh, no, good, yes.
What about all your pals? What's happened to them?
Well, they're all in the cupboard somewhere. What a shame. I'm here. I came here today in a bag. It wasn't very nice, but that's the way I travel these days. Oh.
I must say he's beautifully preserved, isn't he, Nigel? He really is. And Gail, obviously, you put a lot of the words into his mouth.
Well, Hartley and I know each other very well, don't we, Hartley?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, I know her of old. Not quite so old, no.
No. I wrote about 100 scripts for you, Hartley. Yep, and enjoyed almost every minute.
And I destroyed all of them.
I thought you were going to become a double act there for a minute. It was rather good, actually.
Oh, yeah, no, Hartley and I, we do go back a long way, don't we, Hartley?
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Less said about that, the better.
Yes. Well...
Now, I don't know whether to address this to Hartley or to you, Nigel, but I think maybe you, because I know that an awful lot of the episodes were lost, weren't they?
Yes, they were. We recorded about 333, I think.
Wow.
And I recorded myself off the air about 78.
Yeah.
I kept them really just as out of interest, thinking, oh, when I get to be 80, I'll sit back and look and see what I did when I was younger. Yeah. I had no idea that eventually they would end up being the only programs that we actually had recorded on tape, and we'd have to look at them as well.
I'm sorry, I am listening to you, but it's the way it is. Yeah, he's fabulous, isn't he?
Yes.
Now, I don't know whether Hartley is going to be upset about this, but after this you moved on to other friends and you moved on to Spitting Image.
I did, yes. I worked for Spitting Image.
Oh, I'm going to go now then. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.
He's got the hair hump.
He has. I'll give him a hairbrush in a minute.
Yes. Yeah, Spitting Image.
Yeah, Spitting Image. I went on to. Funny enough, it was a very similar production team to Pipkins, because it was being made by Central Television, which was the old ATV really. So many of the people who were working on Pipkins somehow ended up working for Spitting Image as well.
Yeah.
So
on Spitting Image, who were your favourite characters that you did?
That I did, I have to say that towards the end, probably John Major, the grey John Major. Yes. I did him in all the nice peas dear scenes, which were very rewarding to do, because it was hardly any dialogue. It was very much an acting piece.
Yeah.
And one favourite character who nobody really knows and knew who it was, but it was PC Dimbleby, the generic policeman in Spitting Image. He was in all the police sketches. It was this kind of policeman, and I played him, and he was great fun to do.
Well, who are the characters that you didn't? Now, I think I know one you didn't like. It was Roy Hattersley. Was it?
You're right, Roy Hattersley. You always ended up with a wet arm. Because he.
I wonder why. Yeah, I can't imagine.
He was the only character, the only puppet that spat, and he actually did spit. And they had a hose, a small pipe that ran up your arm and out through the mouth, so that when he spoke, so the water came out, and inevitably there was always a leak in the thing, and it would run back down your arm. But it wasn't the worst situation I got into at Spitting Image, I have to say.
Go on then.
A vat of sewage. I was in a vat of sewage, which was disgusting too, but it was actually wallpaper paste, a very thin layer of it, and the heads of these characters came up through the wallpaper paste. It was supposed to be politicians bobbing around in a vat of sewage. But again, the wallpaper paste dribbled down into places that I won't talk about. We were under a vat of spaghetti one time, all kinds of things, weird and wonderful places.
And you got yourself into some rather strange positions at times.
Yes, yes, I have been in various times, in very strange positions. There's always a cupboard or something that you'd have to squeeze into, less and less these days. Well, then we started to, initially we started with all the sets on the floor, so that we were sitting on the floor and the puppets just appeared behind the furniture. This is Pipkins. And then halfway through that run of Pipkins, Jim Henson moved into the next door stage at Elstree, and he started making the Muppet Show, and they had their sets built up so that the floor was 3 foot off the ground. Producer from our show went in and saw this and thought, oh, this is an ideal thing. Then the puppets can move around. So we then eventually had our sets built up. And it was, so then life was easier.
Yes.
We were
Yeah.
standing up.
So you needed the Americans to
Sadly,
give you a
yes.
little inspiration, yes.
But they were an
Yeah.
inspiration, and I worked with them a lot later on too.
Well, you had a lot of inspiration from a Canadian, so
Absolutely.
why not? Now, before I talk about the project that you're working on now, you
Yes.
two, let's just mention stage, because recently you've been doing a lot of stage stuff.
I have, yes. I started off with Philip Schofield in Dr. Dolittle, doing all the animals in that, directing the animals. And then fairly soon after that, because I'd been working for Sesame Street International, setting up versions of Sesame Street around the world, I got involved with the musical Avenue Q, which is a parody of Sesame Street. And that was in 2005. We started that. And now it's at 2015, and I've been doing it for the last 10 years. Basically as a puppet coach, teaching the actors how to use the puppets, helping in the casting sessions, that sort of thing.
Now then, let's come back to this project that you're working on together, and you can both tell me about that, if you will.
Yeah, Monty & Co. really was inspired by Pipkins. We had got together to, we talked about the possibility of reviving Pipkins, but we decided that it would be a very positive thing if we used our talents and our energies to create a new show. And that's what we came up with. Some of the characters might be a little familiar to some people when they watch the show, but essentially the format, or not the format, but the actual feel of the show was so good that we wanted to help, to bring it into the 21st century.
Yes, and there's nothing like it now, because something that is fun. And the lovely thing about Pipkins, although it was preschool, the whole family could watch, and did. The adults remembered it, and the teenage students and that. There's something for every level. And we're going to do that again with Monty & Co.
Yeah, we did have a lot of students watching the show.
Yes.
And in fact, somebody, when I came in here today, said I used to watch it as a teenager.
Now listen, we've been talking about the Pipkins today, that's why you're here. So let's see a clip from this vintage show.
Oh dear, Mrs. McNamara, I was sorry to hear that you're having trouble with the window that we mended for you. Oh, it's rather hot in here, all this typing. I think I'll just go and let in some nice cold air. Oh. Oh. Oh.
So there we are. Well, I think what we're going to do is we're going to leave the last words to Hartley, because this is his big chance for a comeback. This could be the biggest comeback since Sinatra.
Well, in that case, I'll do it my way. Get it? Oh, I should be on TV. Anyway,
Have you got a little message for the
I have.
viewers?
For the viewer. Hello. Oh, sorry, there's more than one, is there? Oh, right. Here's a message. They're going to be making a new program called Monty & Co. And if you'd like to help us make it, you can visit us at Kickstarter very soon. Send us an email at kick@montyandco.co.uk. That's kick@montyandco.co.uk. And if you send us an email there, we'll tell you when the Kickstarter campaign is going to start. We've got a website too, and that remarkably is montyandco.co.uk. That's Coco at the end, if you didn't. Oh, never mind, I'm rambling now. There we are, David. Thank you very much.
Thank you both very much indeed for being absolutely smashing guests on our programme today. Hartley, would you like to say goodbye? Say goodbye to the viewers?
No. All right.
Go on.
Goodbye, viewers. Everywhere.
But listen, don't go away yet, because right after the break, we're going to be back with another great comedy guest here on the David Hamilton Show. Back after this. Thank you very much indeed, and welcome back. My final guest on the programme today is a television comedy writer who has just published his first novel. Please welcome Colin Edmonds.
Hello, David. Nice to see you again.
You too.
Thank you.
Colin, it's just great to see you on the show. And, I've been reading up about you. You started writing at a very, very early age.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me here, David. You look terrific. And next to me, you're going to look terrific anyway. Yeah, I started writing when I was about 16.
Yeah.
I wanted to write jokes from the get-go. And 16 was the time that my parents bought me a plastic Smith Corona portable typewriter, and I used to bash out my jokes.
And you sent them to comedians?
Yeah, I had the audacity to think that maybe some of my stuff was vaguely amusing. And so I sent them off to various comedians with some success. Some comedians wrote back to say, actually, these are awful jokes. Please don't bother me again. You're an idiot. Other people would not reply at all. But a couple of comedians did. A nice, great local comic to hear called Don Mclean. He very, very kindly sent me a nice letter saying, yeah, I like some of your jokes. I'd like to buy some of them. They're not quite right, but and gave me enormous encouragement. And the other was Bob Monkhouse. And to get a letter, of course, from Don Mclean was wonderful, and to get a letter from Bob Monkhouse was magical.
Yeah.
And Bob was very encouraging, because I think Bob, being a joke writer himself, understood what was required and
Yes.
what a joke writer went through. And I got very lucky very early to have those two fine comedians on my side.
Yeah. Do you remember your first joke that you sold? I mean, that's quite a difficult ask, that, but do you remember the first joke you sold?
I remember the first joke I sold to Bob. Quite a saucy joke, which I would imagine why Bob liked it, because it was perfect for cabaret.
Yeah.
Cliff Richard, God bless him, had just started dating Sue Barker.
Yes.
And already I'm thinking maybe this joke's a bit too saucy for you, David, for your show. But I'm going to go through with it anyway. I said, Sue Barker, he's in a relationship. Cliff Richard's in a relationship with Sue Barker. And of course, Cliff's very religious, but even with Sue Barker in romantic moments, he still does a Sermon on the Mount. Well, Bob thought this joke was a bit saucy for television, as you're probably thinking now.
I think the audience enjoyed it.
as the crowd probably thinks now.
Yeah.
But Bob thought this was perfect for cabaret.
Yeah.
And he worked that joke for 5, 6, 7 or 8 years.
Yes. I remember actually, because I saw him many times. I mean, I loved him. We'll talk more about Bob in a moment. But I remember him actually telling that joke, and it was terrific.
Really?
After this, by the way, you went on fairly quickly, still at a very tender age, to write some television program scripts.
Yes, I did. I got very fortunate. Because, David, I wanted to write. I was determined to be a writer. And I think the only way to be a writer is to sit at the typewriter night after night, churning out stuff, and having the audacity to send it to various television companies and various performers. And I got very lucky with the Dave Allen quickie. Dave Allen was you'll remember Dave Allen, a wonderful Irish comedian who had a lovely take on religious humour. All religions were treated with equal contempt by Dave Allen, and his show was enormously popular. But the great thing about Dave Allen's show was that it encouraged new writers. And the script editors, who are Austin Steele and Peter Vincent and Peter Robinson at the BBC, they encouraged new writers all the time. And they encouraged us to send our material. My one sketch that I had on the Dave Allen show was a silent quickie. Because it was silent. It was supposed to get a laugh, but it was silent. And it involved a collection plate, a congregation in church on a Sunday, and the verger passes the collection plate along, and pound notes appear on the collection plate, and on the next row, more money. On the third row, less money. The fourth row, no money at all. On the fifth row, a cracked tin cup. That was the joke. And that aired, and as I said, it was a silent piece of comedy because it had no humorous merit whatsoever. But I think Dave Allen and the script editors quite admired the audacity of the congregation being thieves, and that sketch show was aired when I was about 17.
Yeah. Also, when you were very young, you wrote certainly at least one episode of Bless This House and Love Thy Neighbour.
Yes. Sitcom at that time, situation comedy, was very, very fashionable. There were wonderful, big situation comedies which were getting 20, 25 million people. Bless This House was a sitcom which starred Sidney James, you may remember, and Diana Coupland. And I decided I'd have a go at writing that script. And when you're writing for established characters, it's slightly easier because those characters exist. You've seen them a dozen times on the television. You know what that character's going to say. So in a way, writing that sitcom script is a bit easier. I, with chutzpah, sent my script off, and Vince Powell, who created the series with Harry Driver, wrote back saying, yeah, we quite like this script. We'd like to buy it, please. Wow, what a thrill. And, it was damn good money, David. It was 200 quid.
A lot of money in those days.
Back in the early 70s, it was the king's ransom.
Did you get a screen credit? Was your name on
The show never got made.
Oh.
During the week of production, there was a makeup strike at Teddington.
Oh, no.
And the one show that was lost from the series of 6 was mine.
Oh.
So in fairness to Thames Television and Vince Powell, they said, look, that was bad luck, wasn't it? We've got another show called Love Thy Neighbour, which is quite a controversial show at the time. Would you like to write an episode of that? Oh, yes, please. And that show did get aired. Yeah. So I was very, very lucky. It's out on DVD now. Here we are, 40 years later, and I managed to get it on DVD through Amazon or something. And it arrived, and I said to Lucy, my daughter, and Mark, my son, and Catherine, my wife, I said, "Wow, this is Dad's first script ever aired, and let's watch it now." And they, "Oh, okay, all right, we'll watch it." So I put it on the DVD machine, press play. Well, within 2 minutes, Lucy was texting. Within 5 minutes, Catherine was dozing. And within 10 minutes, Marky was saying, "I think I'll go upstairs and play some PlayStation if you don't mind." But having seen that script, it's terrible.
Is it?
It's absolutely shocking. How I ever got to sell it, I do not know. But hand on heart, David, it's rotten.
Well, listen, despite that, you have written over 1,500 television shows. I mean, that's phenomenal output, isn't it?
It is. Not all sitcom. No. Most of them are game shows. Most of them, a lot of them chat shows and clip shows. And I've been very fortunate to be involved in long-running shows. The last real long runner that I was involved in was Today with Des and Mel. And that ran daily for about 5 years. So as a consequence, if you do the maths, one show a day for 5 years, that's an awful lot of shows. It's suddenly
you also
1,500.
with Bob Monkhouse on Celebrity Squares and Family Fortunes, again, you know, long-running shows. Now, I have to say that I was Bob's biggest fan. I mean, he's really my hero in the business. It must have been fantastic, you know, being so close to a genius like him. He was a comic genius.
He was, absolutely. We started out, as I told you, very, very early. And of course, I was still at school. But he was very encouraging. And then I left school and I took a job at IPC Magazines, and he was still very encouraging. And then one day he said, "I think you should come to the house. You live in Kensal Rise, I live in St John's Wood at the time. Come along to the house, we should meet, because you've been writing for me for 3 years now. Let's do the handshake." And suddenly, there I was at Bob's house in Leighton Buzzard, in the presence of the great man. And you know, when you meet your hero, your mouth goes dry, doesn't it? And you find yourself unable to speak. But he was charming and lovely. And interestingly enough, he was doing a radio show called Punchline at the time, a radio show. It was a panel show. And I said to Bob, "I'm still working at IPC Magazines, but I've got a new phone number. Would you like my card?" And Bob said, "No, I won't take the card. I'll lose the card. But I've got this Punchline script here. I'll write your name and address and your phone number on this Punchline script." And I remember him vividly, David. Colin E. 019600124, that was the number at the time. And it was on that Punchline script, and of course he called that number. If I can spin you forward now to, sadly, after Bob died, and I'm helping Bob's daughter Abigail sort out the Monkhouse archive, I came across a pile of scripts, Punchline scripts, and it was, 2 piles that far off the ground, because Bob kept everything, threw nothing away. And halfway down was this Punchline script, and there it was, with Colin E., and he'd kept it for nearly 50 years. Isn't that incredible?
It is incredible. One of the things that I loved about Bob was that, because I saw him lots of times live, you know, in cabaret, and he never did the same act twice, because he would go to a club or a corporate event that he was at, and he'd find out about the people who ran the club or the company. He would do his homework on them, and he'd come out and he would do about 15 minutes of gags that were tailored to that particular venue. And I tell you what, I thought, how does he remember? He didn't have it all written down. He had a fantastic retention, didn't he?
It's a terrific memory, absolutely. He would call me and say, "I'm doing a corporate job about ties. I'm doing a tie manufacturer. If you could furnish me with a few jokes about ties, that'll be lovely." So you'd rack your brains and you'd write your tie jokes. And not only would he do tie jokes, he would do jokes about the managing director of the tie company.
Yes.
There was a trick to it, and he won't mind me giving this trick away now. each company that he performed for would get a little questionnaire which said, have you got a drinker in the company?
Oh, right.
Who's the company drunk?
Yeah.
Who's the worst driver? Who's the ladies' man? Who's the Lothario? Who's the scruff? And what he would do, he would impose jokes that already exist. A drinking joke, a bad driving joke, oh boy, aren't you scruffy joke, and impose those on those people who worked for the company. And that was the trick.
Very clever.
Because the crowd thinks,
Yes.
wow, he's written those jokes specifically for our MD.
Yeah, yeah. By the way, talking of ties, can I say I love your tie? That's like, can we see that? That's like $1 million tie, isn't it? It's fantastic, isn't it?
Well, it's the closest I'm ever going to get to $1 million. Yeah, Catherine bought me this for a birthday years ago, and it's one of my. It goes goes nicely.
That's a great tie. Getting back to Bob for a moment, what I remember in his act, and I've been asking so many people about this, and you may remember it, he used to finish with his version of My Way.
Yeah.
And he did a parody on it, and it was absolutely filthy. Actually,
It was.
It was about well, a very unusual character.
Yes, indeed.
But I would love. You didn't write that, did you?
I know the story about it.
You tell me the story about it.
The story is that that Bob thought, it'd be wonderful to finish on a big song.
Yeah.
Because the comedians of that time used to go out on a big old number, which would get them their applause.
Yeah.
And Bob thought, I'll do a parody of My Way. So he commissioned the music. And he was on his way to this particular club to perform it for the first time and realised, I haven't written the lyrics to this damn song yet. And so he composed the lyrics on the way to the club to perform it the first time in the car. And it's very saucy. If I tell you that the last line of the song is, and she does it for free, yes, friends, that's my way, gives you some idea of,
Yes.
of how saucy the song
Yes.
was.
That's right. Yeah.
But you remember the parody.
I do, and do you know? There's nowhere can I find the words of that, but I would love to. If you ever came across the words of that song that he did.
Yeah.
But there's no way you can't find them anywhere. But it was absolutely terrific. Now let's come up to date, because I mentioned on the intro to you that you have just written your first novel. In fact, I think you've got.
Well, here's the front.
cover here.
Here's the front cover.
It's the front cover.
It's the front
That's
cover.
called Steam, Smoke and Mirrors.
Yeah.
And apparently it's described as steampunk. Is that right? What is steampunk?
Well, steampunk, if you can imagine, it's first of all, the book's about a Victorian magician. It's a music hall magician, and his assistant. My magician's called Michael Magister. His assistant is called Phoebe, and they help the Victorian Secret Service to solve some arcane and strange X-Files type crimes. I like the idea of magic in the Victorian era, because the Victorian era is so special. It's so industrial, and steampunk is a fusion of modern day science with the Victorian era. So if you can imagine, it's the future as the Victorians would have imagined it. So you get steam-driven computers, and you get steam-driven cars, and the idea of a magician using steam-powered equipment on stage for his illusions, I thought was fascinating. I could have written a novel about a detective who was a comedian, but there's no fun in that. You can't be cracking gags and solving crimes. It didn't seem to work. But if you get a Victorian magician solving crimes in the Victorian era, using all that subterfuge, and a magician being an expert in sleight of hand and how stuff's hidden, that struck me as being a really interesting area. And there are a lot of Victorian detectives. Sherlock Holmes, of course, is the most famous. But I wanted this magician to be special. So my Victorian magician is a great observer. He's intensely observant. You work with Paul Daniels, and Paul doesn't miss a trick, because magicians use their eyes and they, okay. Very quickly, to digress, I said to Paul Daniels once, I've decorated our bedroom, and I'm really pleased with the way I've butted up the wallpaper together. He said, I'll come and see that, because I'm an expert at wallpapering, and I'll come and see. And there was one little bit behind the door that didn't quite butt up. And I said, well, this is the room, Paul. What do you think? Oh, it's marvellous, lovely. Shame about that bit there. And that was the bit that didn't butt up. And he spotted it without even seeing it, because his peripheral vision was so bad. Anyway, I digress. Magicians are great observers. My Victorian magician is a great observer. He will spot something that nobody else spots in the room, but he will interpret it incorrectly. He'll get it completely wrong. And Phoebe, his assistant, is the person who will interpret it correctly.
Oh.
And like all magicians, all magic acts, it's the magician's assistant that's the brains of the outfit. It's the magician's assistant that does all the work. And that's what I wanted to employ with this particular book and these two detectives.
Brilliant. The book has just been published. And how long did it take you to write it?
Oh, it took forever. It took about 18 months.
Did it? Yeah.
Because I'm sort of winding down from writing my comedy now, because comedy's changed, and me being a service industry writing jokes for comedians, so many comedians don't need joke writers now because they write their own material, and marvellous they are at it. And rather than give up writing per se, I thought, let's try and write a comedy drama. So I wrote a comedy drama called Smoke and Mirrors. Couldn't sell it anywhere. And then it sat on the shelf, and I thought, well, maybe don't do it as a TV show, do it as a novel. And so 18 months later, I translated the television script into book form, into novel form. And what's interesting, David, is having the characters exist and the story exist in the television script, to see how they develop still further in the novel. It's quite fascinating. And that's why I love writing. That's why I've loved writing since I was a teenager, to see stuff create, evolve, and to see things happen on the page.
What do you think, by the way, about the modern day comics, the alternative comics, or whatever you like to call them? Who makes you laugh of the modern breed?
The modern breed are marvellous. And of course the difference, David, between Bob Monkhouse's era as a comedian and the current crop of terrific performers is that today's performers can play the O2.
Yes.
Well, 20,000 people.
Playing arenas.
Yeah.
Comedy is the new rock and roll.
That's exactly it. It really is very hip now, very trendy.
Yeah.
Whereas Bob would never have dreamt of playing the O2, because he would say, you know, in performance, you can't see my gestures because I'm that big on the stage.
Yes.
But of course, now things have changed with technology, and all the comedians are on big screens either side of the O2, so you can see the gestures and you can see the gurney in close-up. That's how comedy's progressed, and Michael McIntyre is a great exponent of that kind of physical performance. To watch Michael McIntyre work is to work the stage, to work the crowd. He's very much like Bob Monkhouse in the way that he used the microphone and almost physicality to perform his jokes rather than just tell jokes.
Ladies and gentlemen, Colin Edmonds.
Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, David. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed to Colin. Thanks to all my guests today. Please join us next week when we'll have more fun on the show. See you then. Bye-bye.